Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. You are here at the Effective Compensation Planning webinar. Just take a moment as you are trickling in to see this quote. Note to salary setters, pay your people the least possible and you'll get from them the same, by Malcolm Forbes. All right. So good afternoon and welcome to the Effective Compensation Planning for Small Business Owners, featuring our knowledgeable speaker on all things keeping business leaders up at night, Sonja Parkinson, VP of HR Consulting Services. Also on this call today is Amy Sell, President and CEO of Amy Sell Talent since 2015, who is passionate about tackling HR small business challenges. We're delighted to have you all here join us. I'm Michelle Galbraith, VP of People and Business Development with Amy Sell Talent, and I will be facilitating today's session. We hear from clients and in the news that the struggle is real in attracting and retaining clients. A study by Consumer Affairs reported the top reasons employees are taking a leap: seeking higher pay, better benefits, insufficient raises, needs not being met by pay, and pay inequality. So we're glad you are here joining us to hear from our HR expert, who will share valuable compensation tips, structure, and trends to be more competitive in the market of talent. Just a few, as attendees are trickling in, I would like to share a few important housekeeping notes. First, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to the Amy Sell Talent YouTube site. We will be sharing the recording of the slide presentation as well. So for privacy, all participants are in listen-only mode with microphone muted and cameras off. During these live presentations, please excuse cameos from canine colleagues and other unexpected moments. We hope that doesn't happen, but if the webinar were to close unexpectedly, please reopen it from the link you used to attend this presentation. We also welcome your questions, so please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your Zoom window. We will do our best to address your questions during the session, as well as reserve a few minutes at the end. If you have specific questions about your organization's compensation strategy, feel free to schedule a complimentary quick chat. For improvement and future topics you would like to see, we ask that you complete our short survey at the conclusion of this webinar. Amy Sell Talent has been in the business of supporting growing businesses and advising employers on recruiting, compensation plans, conflict resolution, organizational development, and more. So, Sonja, our featured speaker, Sonja Parkinson, is known on our team for leading our human resources services consultants. Her background in accounting has given her a penchant for understanding the numbers and bottom line for business. But her love for people and providing solutions for growing organizations brought her to human resources, an area that she thrives in. She's led the HRS team in developing salary surveys, implementing compensation and bonus structures for non-union positions, advised on market pricing and reports from entry-level to C-suite positions. She's also advised on and recommended recruitment and retention issues, including organizations who need guidance on DEI. Overall, since 2015, Amy Sell Talent and the team has grown in a deep bench strength and advised clients on over 1,000+ positions across many industries. Specifically, Sonja and the HRS team are passionate about delivering customized plans for a variety of clients representing small businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and municipalities. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my trusted colleague and expert and VP of Customer Success, HR Consulting Solutions, Sonja Parkinson.
Thanks, Michelle, for that introduction. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Compensation planning has been a hot topic recently. If you are a small business owner, you've likely spent a lot of time wondering how to attract the best employees to your organization. or how to structure your pay so that your superstars, those heavy lifters in your company, stay with you for a long time and not get a job somewhere else. Or maybe you're not quite sure, maybe you're curious about how the pay that you're offering your employees compares to the market. So for the rest of this hour, we're going to talk about these things, and I'll be providing you with some tools and some tips and resources. So we have a full agenda for you today. We're going to start off with compensation planning basics, then take a look at trends in pay transparency laws that have come into effect recently across the country. Then moving on to preparing for compliance and job posting tips. And then we're going to wrap it all up with employee and employer perspectives on pay and pay transparency. But first, I would love to learn a little bit more about your organizations. And so we've set up a quick poll question for you. And I'm gonna ask Michelle to put that on the screen. And the question is, what is the most significant compensation challenge your company is facing today? Is it A, knowing what the market is paying for a particular position? B, internal pay inequity? C, designing incentive programs that promote efficiency and productivity? D, attracting the best candidates on a budget? Or E, other? And we'll keep this poll up for about 30 seconds or so, and then Michelle will tell us more about the results.
Results are trickling in right now. And it looks like it's leaning towards mostly attracting the best candidates on a budget, Sonja.
Oh, wow, wonderful. All right, so let's kick things off by talking about what is a compensation plan and why it's so important to small businesses. So simply put, the compensation plan is a way that the organization can communicate its position on employee pay and rewards. It includes all of the compensatory elements of a pay strategy, for example, salaries, wages, benefits. It could also include bonuses, incentives, commissions, raise schedules for years of service, fringe benefits, any union perks, or employer-provided vendor discounts. So because of its scope, it's tempting to see the compensation plan or compensation planning as an activity for larger companies, maybe because they have more employees or they have a bigger budget. But it's very important that small business leaders put some mind share into compensation planning too. And there are a number of reasons for this. The first is you want to attract employees to your organization. So as many of you are aware, the workplace has changed a lot since 2020. We're now in the era of the Great Resignation or the Great Reshuffle. I've even heard someone refer to it as the Big Quit. And you might have heard these terms trending on the news, or maybe your organization is one that has experienced high turnover recently. Your employees are quitting at an alarming rate, and you're sort of scrambling to fill those vacancies, while at the same time, keeping up with your levels of customer service. So the Pew Research Center did a survey to find out why people were quitting, right? And so they found that people left their jobs for three main reasons. The first is low pay. That's a no-brainer. You know, pay is always in the mix. The second is lack of opportunities for advancement. And thirdly, feeling disrespected at work. So employees are realizing that they can find better ways to make money elsewhere. They can find higher wages, stable hours, flexibility somewhere else. And so if you're not currently looking at your compensation plan and adjusting with the times, then you're standing behind the 8 ball when it comes to attracting the right people to your organization. Comp plans also help employees understand exactly how they're valued within the company. Employees tend to be more accepting of pay decisions when they understand how these decisions are made, and if they believe everyone else in the organization is subject to the same system. Without this transparency, employees tend to feel that their compensation is based or is controlled by their manager, how their manager feels about them, and not as an organization-wide system. Employees are also much more likely to accept an unfavorable outcome as it relates to pay if they understand the process that determined the outcome, even if they don't agree with it. A comp plan also helps managers understand, support, and communicate compensation information. It's unlikely that your HR person is going to have the resources or the bandwidth to have these individual conversations with everyone in your company. And so managers can help cascade this information down to employees and discuss those specific components of each person's unique compensation package. Comp plans also increase the morale and cooperation among employees. There is a positive correlation between pay and motivation and performance. And finally, comp plans help organizations administer pay equitably for work performed. You know, getting into the weeds can really uncover some gaps or some inequities that you might not have discovered otherwise. Google commissioned a comp study a few years ago, and what they expected to find was that there was some disparity in the way women or even members of minority groups were paid. But to their surprise, what they actually found was that it was the men who were being paid less than women for the same work. So Google had to pay out over $10 million to about 10,000 employees to standardize things. Okay, so let's go on to building your comp structure. What is it that you need to do? The first thing you want to do is define your compensation philosophy. You can think of your compensation philosophy as your thesis or your premise for everything else that's going to follow. And there are 4 general approaches that companies follow. They could lead the market, they could lag the market, they could match the market, or the 4th approach is any combination of those previous 3 that I mentioned. Leading the market. That is simply paying more than your competitors or others within your industry for a particular position. And there are a few reasons why you might want to take this approach. The first is if you're in an industry where you have to keep up with innovation, you have to be on the cutting edge of things, then you're going to want to hire the most experienced and the most skilled person. So to incentivize things a bit, you want to lead the market. Or maybe your positions are hard to fill. That's another reason. Or maybe you're one of those organizations that are in the enviable position where you have a lot of cash on hand and you want to invest in your employees that way. Excellent reason to lead the market. And then there's lagging the market. That's paying a little less or even a lot less than what your competitors or others within your industry are paying for a particular role. And there are reasons to take that approach as well. Budget constraints is probably the most obvious reason. You just don't have the cash to pay as much as you would like. Or perhaps you have a robust applicant pool already. Lots of people want to work for your company. And so you're not as pressed to use compensation as an incentive to attract. Or it could be that the mission of your organization or what your community impact is something that applicants really focus on, and they're not too concerned about the pay because they're more aligned with your mission. And I can think of charities, other nonprofits, or even religious organizations that could fall in that category. And finally, there is rewards and incentives. Sometimes your benefit package or your perks may kind of offset any deficiencies you have on the cash end of things. And then there's matching the market. As the name implies, you're going to pay exactly what the market is paying. And then in terms of a combination of these methods or these approaches, you could do something like a lead lag strategy where you lead the market at the start of the year, and then as the year progresses, you kind of lag behind. All of these are great approaches that you could take. The next step in developing your comp structure is looking at your job descriptions. A well-designed compensation system always includes clear documentations about the roles in your company. So when we are thinking of a job description, we want to make sure that this job description at least has the minimum or essential functions of the position, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that a person would need to possess in order to successfully carry out this role, and some language around the work environment or the conditions under which this job is to be performed. Now, although I'm talking about job descriptions in the context of a compensation plan, know that job descriptions are just an all-round, all-purpose tool that can be used for many different things. It helps new employees understand their role within the company. It gives them that, that reference point. It could indicate a training need. It could help you manage your performance. Or in the event you need to post or hire for this position, the job description will form the basis of that posting. Another step in developing your compensation structure is considering the external equity. Okay, so once we have a clear understanding of what the position entails, we want to find out what is the market paying for this role. And there are a number of ways that you can source this market data, some free, some not. So one is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They have an online database that contains the mean wage for over 800 occupations. It's going to be the largest and most comprehensive free source of salary data that you come across. And because it's so big, it's very likely that whatever position you're looking for, you will find a match there. However, there's a drawback. The data can be sometimes old, maybe 2 or 3 years old. So you need to just bear in mind that if you're using that as a source, you may not have the most up-to-date information. Another free option is online sites such as Glassdoor, Indeed, Career Builder. All these sites offer free salary data. The sites are easy to use, they're accessible. The drawback, however, for using these sites is that a lot of the data that they collect is employee reported or crowdsourced in some way. So there's not a good way to really verify the accuracy of the data that you're using. And then there is the professional and trade organizations. Many times they commission salary surveys and provide this information to their members for free. Bear in mind that they are established, these trade organizations are established to benefit the interest of their members. So just be cognizant of any biases that they may have as it relates to this data. Another option is employer-sourced salary surveys that are often combined into databases. This will be your best bet in terms of timely and accurate data. You'll be able to slice and dice the information however you want by company size, by revenue, geographic location, number of employees, you name it. Of course, like anything else, there's a drawback here, and that's going to be the cost. It can range anywhere from a few $1,000s a year to $15,000, $20,000, depending on the service level agreement you have with the provider. At AMISAL, we have invested in the salary analyst database. We also create and deploy our own customized salary surveys. So we're able to provide timely local and national market data to help our clients determine a competitive wage. And then we want to move on to considering internal equity. Sometimes you cannot just take what the market is paying for a position and adopt it into your pay plan without considering how that pay compares to other roles within the organization. For example, if the market price for a sales associate is, let's say, $17 an hour, but your floor manager only makes $15 an hour, then you can imagine how bringing that sales associate in at $17 can be a little problematic. So you'll need to evaluate each job and make some adjustments so that things are equitable internally. And there are several job evaluation methods out there, but I would say the easiest and the most popular among small business leaders would be the ranking method. And this is where you list all the jobs in your organization and determine a hierarchy. So you as a business owner or business leader, you can determine that the position of accountant is more strategically important than, let's say, the position of an administrative assistant. And the administrative role is more strategically important than that of, let's say, an intern. I want to emphasize here that in this process, you are ranking the jobs and not the people in the jobs. Another consideration is that you'll need to make sure that employees with similar positions or skill sets within the company are compensated in a similar way, whether that be in their salary or any other additional benefits that come with the position. In other words, you really need to keep an eye out for equal pay for equal work. And then we're going to delve right into developing the actual structure. In any organization, there's going to be multiple different types of jobs based on the level of responsibility and the accountability. So the pay is going to vary from role to role. So we want to make sure that the process of determining what these differences should be is fair. And so we can use the job rankings that we just talked about with the accountant, the administrative assistant, the intern, and so on. And using those, we need to be able to define a minimum and maximum pay range for the employee based on his or her role. And we do that by creating job grades. There are no standard number of job grades that a company should have, but typically larger organizations are going to have more and smaller organizations will have less. So what could this look like? Let's do a quick example here. Let's take a marketing firm, for instance, with 5 job grades. What it could look like is the CEO at the top, so that would be job grade 1, and then below the CEO are the vice presidents, job grade number 2, below the presidents, the directors, below the directors, the managers, and then the specialists. So a key point about job grades, or a few points about job grades that we need to bear in mind, is that an employee can only belong to one job grade at a time. And all employees within that job grade are subject to the same minimum and the same maximum range in terms of pay. And then as an employee moves from one job grade to another, there is the expectation that the salaries will increase as well. So the whole idea of creating a range and not just providing a singular number is to create room for the employee to grow within the role. If the range is too small, then the growth opportunity within the grade would be less. For example, let's take a position of accountant, for instance, and let's say we have developed a range of $60,000 to $61,000. That is only a $1,000 range. And so it really doesn't incentivize the incumbent to go out and get new skills and acquire new knowledge, because the maximum amount of money they can make is just $1,000 more than what they're already making. On the other hand, if the range is too large, then it will take employees a pretty long time to move from one job grade to another. So having appropriate salary ranges can have a positive impact on employee retention. All right, so let's look at some trends in pay transparency laws. So over the last couple of years, there's been a trend across the country where states and even cities have enacted or are considering enacting pay transparency laws. And these require employers to disclose information about their salaries to both applicants and employees. So let's take a look at where some of these laws have been enacted and the disclosure requirements. So first we have California and Nevada. California was, I would say, a trailblazer in this area. They were one of the first states to enact pay transparency laws. And both California and Nevada require that employers provide salary information upon request by the applicant or after the applicant completes their first interview. Colorado and New York, as part of the job posting, and Colorado and New York they have some of the strictest pay transparency requirements, because you actually have to put it in the posting. And then there's Connecticut at the time of the offer or upon first request, Maryland and Rhode Island upon request after application, and Ohio, specifically Cincinnati and Toledo, and Washington State upon request or after a conditional job offer. So you might be wondering, how does this affect me? Particularly if you are a Michigan-based employer or if your state or city is not listed on this slide. Well, one, the trend does not seem to be going away anytime soon, so it's definitely something you want to keep at least in the back of your mind and stay ahead of. Then for businesses that hire remote workers, crossing state lines requires adhering to state laws. If you're posting jobs that allow for work from anywhere, these states and cities will need you to disclose the salary ranges within your job posting. And if you are doing a nationwide search for remote workers, you'll have to comply irrespective of the location of your company. So we're coming up on another poll that I'm going to ask Michelle to put on the screen. And the question is, are you currently including your salary ranges in your job posting? And the options are yes, no, or unsure. And we're going to leave this up for about 30 seconds, and then Michelle is going to share with us the results.
All right, thanks so much for your responses. It looks like it's almost about half and half between the groups of disclosing salary ranges on job postings.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so now that we have a good sense of what's going on around the trends towards pay transparency, I want to spend the next few minutes talking about how you can prepare for compliance and also provide you with some job posting tips. So first, you want to make sure that your internal compensation structures are set up. That is, your job grades and your pay ranges. You want to make sure that your formalized approach is clear, it's rational, it's defensible. Remember that your pay practices are now going to be open to scrutiny, both internally and externally. So you want to use this opportunity to define and communicate a compensation program that you can be proud of. Then you want to consider whether you will apply the same pay transparency requirements across all locations, whether or not local regulations require it. For example, if you are hiring for a position in Chicago, Detroit, Toledo, Are you going to post the salary range across all 3 locations, or are you going to limit that to just Toledo, where the local requirements, where the local laws require it? And then you want to develop your communication and change management strategy. Think about how pay transparency is going to change the culture of your organization. Change management and communication readiness, those are going to be absolutely key. Do your employees know how their salaries are being calculated or how their ranges are being set? Remember that once you disclose that information, once you put it in the posting or you tell everyone what everybody's making, employees are going to quickly compare themselves with others. So you really need to be prepared to answer the tough questions and have these conversations where you interpret and discuss the ranges and, you know, help them understand how things are being done. And you're going to want to frame those conversations in the context of a organizational-wide pay system or pay structure. So let's look at some job posting tips. So when including the salary on the posting, you want to try to get the range as close as possible to the total compensation, while at the same time being very clear and realistic about your comp structure. There are some positions or some industries that are a little tricky, like sales or account management, because there's usually a base compensation piece and then an incentive piece, usually bonuses or commissions. So if you only focus on the base compensation piece, then your salaries may look really low in comparison to other postings out there. When in actuality, the earnings could be even higher than what the candidate is anticipating. So at the very least, we want to make the earnings potential very clear in the wording of your posting. If you can offer more money based on the level of experience or competency, you can certainly note that in the posting as well. Let's say the position that you're posting for has a range of 60,000 to 80,000. Before you even start recruiting, you can determine the different competency levels and where that gets you on the range. And then you can also highlight a typical salary or career path in the job posting. For example, sales jobs, you can show what top performance can earn or what the candidate's income potential could be. They need to understand, applicants need to understand what's in store for them in terms of a career path, what they can expect in terms of growth within the position. Outlining career paths not only helps attract candidates, but it helps with employee retention when employees can know clearly how they can progress within the company in terms of pay and responsibilities. And then we want to make applying as easy as possible for the candidate by anticipating their questions and addressing them up front. We want to be as transparent as possible. We don't want to wait until the end to deal with questions at all, especially when it relates to pay. Now, when it comes to pay transparency, there are going to be pros and there are going to be cons for both the employee and the employer. So let's take a look at each of these, and we'll start with the pros first. And we have 5 of them listed here. The first is organizations are more likely to engage in equitable and fair payment of employees. That's definitely a pro. As we discussed earlier, disclosing pay information opens the company up to scrutiny. but it also provides the company an opportunity to fix the pay issues that would otherwise gone unnoticed. Then it might result in employees spending less time focusing on office politics and more time on the task at hand. We know that when employees don't have all the facts, they can make assumptions and about how people are paid. And sometimes these assumptions are not true. And so pay transparency helps employees get the information they need so they can focus on work and on, delivering results and not on what their neighbor is getting paid. Pay transparency also builds a reputation as an employer of choice. Pay transparency is definitely a way that you can use to differentiate your company from other employers, and you can highlight your pay, your benefits, your perks, and whatever. All right, it weeds out candidates with out-of-budget pay requirements. I don't know how many of us on this call have had the experience where you find the perfect candidate, you take them through multiple rounds of interviews, and then at the end of the process, you realize that what they're asking for in pay is not something that you can afford. And so you've wasted all that time and you have to let them go. Well, pay transparency helps eliminate a lot of that risk. And then finally, on the pro side, it conveys your company's commitment to paying every employee what they're worth. And of course, this in turn leads to increased employee retention. All right, getting over to the right side, which are the cons, we have here loss of negotiating power for both the employer and the employee. Absolutely. Once all of the cards are on the table, we would expect that both the employee and the employer loses some negotiating power because now, there are parameters on what the discussion could entail because now you're posting a range. We have here employees can compare their pay with other employees, which could end up turning your employees against one another. Absolutely, it could, but if you have a well thought out structure that's communicated to employees and they understand why they're being paid what they're being paid, then you can really reduce that risk of employees turning against each other and, the office politics and all of that. The third con here, the possibility of false comparisons between your company's pay practices and those of your competitors. Yes, that's a con. People may be making false comparisons, comparing apples to oranges. And that's why, again, we want to be as clear as possible in the posting, being very clear about the salary and the benefits and the earnings potential. We want to put all the information out there so that they're not making assumptions and making false comparisons. Another con is wage wars. And I feel that's unavoidable. Once you post your salaries out there, there's nothing stopping a competitor from one-upping you. You offer 50,000, they offer 55. There's not much you can do about that. And then finally, on the con side, we have candidates will expect to be paid at the top of the range, and they might feel disgruntled even before starting a job. That is possible. Typically, applicants feel that they're qualified and they deserve whatever the highest going rate is. And so I feel that showing a minimum and maximum pay range on the job posting, and then kind of highlighting the knowledge, skills, and abilities that it takes to get to the different points on that range can help eliminate some of that disgruntled feeling that an applicant could have. Okay. Oops, I think I lost my slides here. So I hope I've given you some valuable information and tips around compensation planning basics, trends in pay transparency laws, and some good information around compliance. And so now it's time to open it up for your questions. And so I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonja. There was so much information that you provided there in regards to trends for other states. And then if you are an employer that is hiring remote workers from other states, how you need to be aware of the laws that are enacted in those particular states. As well as, I know one of the top questions that that our audience was concerned about is it was about attracting the best candidates on a budget. And so I did hear some tips in there that you provided, Sonja, in regards to what you're posting in your job postings, the salary range, the other perks that are involved with the position, the upward mobility or the training that is involved with the roles. So there's other things that can be very attractive to a job seeker when they're looking at you as an employer. So there's some things in there that that can be rolled up, even though maybe the compensation base is maybe a lower budget. Would you say that to be true, Sonja?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are lots of ways to put together a comp plan. As I mentioned, all candidates aren't going after the money, you know. So having those benefits, those perks as well, really goes a long way for some candidates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that sometimes it's the like professional dollars that might go towards that learning aspect, the continuous learning, or it's being able to work remotely or in a hybrid situation, so they have flexibility. So employer job seekers might have flexibility within their particular role as well. We did have a few questions that came through, and so I want to go ahead and allow folks to continue to ask those, you know, submit questions in the Q&A box. And so one here is, how does tenure pay play into salary range, and what is the best way to handle an employee that has essentially been redlined in that comp range, but there's no opportunity for growth within our organization?
That's actually, thanks, Michelle. That's actually a really common situation. Sometimes it's because the employee has been hired in at the top of the range and there's no room for growth, or it could be that the employee has been in that position for a really long time and they've had several raises over the years that have put them at that limit. And so there are a number of ways that you could, you know, deal with that. If they're great employees, you're going to absolutely want to retain them and you want to keep rewarding them. So one way you can do it is you can keep the base pay as is and then reward them with like a bonus or an end of year payout. So that way they get the benefit of the increase, you know, the increase in salary, or not salary, increase in compensation, but it's just not affecting that baseline. You could also look for developmental opportunities to transition that employee into a role where they have more responsibility. That's another option. And then the final option is a pay freeze. I mean, that doesn't feel good. I wouldn't recommend it, but certainly it is an option. Just freeze salaries and that's where they're at. I hope that answers your question.
Great, Sonja. Thank you so much. So we do have additional questions trickling in. One being, how do I establish a pay range?
Okay, for a pay range, there are three important data points that you need to think about. A minimum, which is like the floor, a maximum, I would like to call it the roof, and then the midpoint, which is something in between, usually equidistant from the maximum and the minimum. There is no standard pay range or no standard formula that a company must follow, but as a best practice, you want your upper range to be about 15% higher than the midpoint, and your lower or your minimum to be 15% less than the midpoint. So you have like a 30% range, and that would be applicable more for non-executive positions. When you get into that executive realm, things can be a little different. But I would say just stick within that 30% spread and you should be fine.
Thanks, Sonja. You did get a comment. Thank you for the earlier response to the first question we had. And so it sounds like giving a 30% range is important when establishing the pay structure. We have another question that has come in. Often there are laws that are applied to large companies, which seem to be defined as companies with, say, 50 to 100 employees. Do these job posting requirements apply to a small company?
The short answer is yes. As far as I'm aware, let me take that back. So every state is going to be different, and we'll have to look at the state requirements for each one to see what the minimum number of employees is. So I want to answer this question by saying it depends on the state. So I don't want to give a blanket response to that. Certainly some do not have that minimum and some do.
And one thing I'll chime in a little bit too is that Michigan doesn't have the same laws that some of these other states that are really leading the area have. However, a lot of the job board systems that we use, such as Indeed and LinkedIn, they are responding to the different state laws by oftentimes requiring a salary range to be put in a posting, or they will make up their own salary range, which can be very off base from what you would do. And we've had clients that have had the generated salary range much lower, and then the actual salary range, which discourages people from applying. So, again, there's different implications, no matter what the state is around, because of these trends in pay transparency.
Thank you, Sonja and Amy, for that insight. We do have another question about hiring for senior level or executive level positions like a CEO. The question was, there's any insight on hiring a CEO? So I'm assuming that's around compensation, but there's no other specific pieces.
Yeah, hiring a CEO is, and that's a great question. Hiring CEO is a little bit tricky because there is a range of experiences and knowledge that a CEO could have to perform effectively. And so perhaps I would need to get a little bit more information or more clarity on that question. CEO pay can range from, the range is endless, based on, their experiences that they bring to the table.
And I can chime in a little bit on that. In terms of, because we've done a lot of work with venture funded startups and as well as private equity based companies. So a CEO for like Ford Motor Company or publicly held companies, I mean, those are millions and millions of dollars. But what we have seen with some of our clients, again, for venture-backed startups that have investment or they're revenue positive, we're typically seeing a range of cash compensation of about $150,000 to $250,000 of cash. And then if they are a non-founder CEO, between 5 and 10% equity. And then on the private equity side, because with venture capital, there's expected to be an exit, which would provide a very nice return on that stock. However, with private equity, there's an equity fund that owns that and is looking for a return. So there isn't much in the way of equity compensation, but the base salaries are a lot higher, of around probably $250,000 to $400,000 for a CEO. So again, as Sonja mentioned, it's a huge range based on the skills and experiences and where people are in terms of their career and experiences and accomplishments.
Great. Wow. So it really varies. And thank you for that information, Amy, in terms of private equity versus VC, and then like the range that you can see depending on the organization and the skills and knowledge required for the CEO position. I would, and I think this is a great opportunity, unless we have additional questions coming in, just to share if what comes next. We will be sharing all the slides that you've received today and the recording. And so that will be sent to you, as well as the recording and survey. We would ask that if you have the opportunity to submit the survey for our learning purposes and what you would like to see in the future in terms of discussion topics from our Amy Cell Talent team, we are happy to do so. And there's some great questions that we received today, and perhaps you have some more specific questions regarding your organization. And we would love for you, if you're interested, to schedule a complimentary quick chat with one of our HR staff members, such as Sonja and her team. And so we would love for you to do that. And you can do that by calling the number down below or sending an email at info@amycelltalent.com. We are so glad that you were able to attend today. We hope you took some notes and that you're able to maybe implement some things that you've learned, especially these new trends that are out and about, as well as how to handle attracting staff on a lower budget. So we wish you the best in your future endeavors, and we look forward to hopefully working with you and seeing your company grow. Thank you on behalf of Amy Cell Talent. Have a great afternoon.